And greetings. Happy, what is it? Tuesday. I almost said Monday. No, yesterday was Monday. We had the day off. Happy Tuesday. Welcome to the Steve Deace Show here live and on demand on Blaze TV, radio, and podcast with Aaron McIntyre and Todd Erzin. I am Steve Deace. Want to also say welcome to a brand new partner on the show. You know, we had a previous one that was on the show for a couple of years. And, you know, all good things must come to an end, Jean-Luc. We had a previous partner that I thought made some incredible underwear. And we sold quite a bit of underwear for them over the years. But after a while, you know, people hear the same pitch, the same thing over and over again. You know, things run their course, you move on. And we had other people come to us wanting to fill that void. And I just got to tell you, man, whenever you have a breakup, I needed some time. I needed some space. I did. You know, didn't want to just hop right into another relationship, Todd, especially with something as intimate as your underwear. You know what I'm talking about.
Are we transitioning into Call Your Daddy programming? What's going on?
So I waited. I said, I'm going to need a little time. All right. And then I got some samples from a new company. Well, they're not new. They're new to us. From a new partner. One of the samples I tried was a company called Undertac. TAC. Undertac is their name. All right. And I have to tell you, phenomenal underwear. I mean, phenomenal. And the bar was high. I mean, the previous relationship was great. You know, I have some fond memories of that relationship. The bar was high. But Undertac is incredible. And I should have known right away. When you're dealing with underwear tested by special forces that operate in Africa in some of the hottest and most miserable conditions out there, they have premium nylon and modal options. That is 50% more moisture wicking than cotton. Naturally antibacterial, which for me, with the whole MRSA thing, that's a big thing for me now. All right, so this stuff is phenomenal, extremely comfy. All right, so go to undertac.com, get 20% off site-wide when you use my offer code there with our new partners at Undertac. Steve20 is where you want to go. Undertac, T-A-C, all one word. Undertac.com. Use the code Steve20. If you know as a pops you're getting underwear from somebody for Christmas, you might as well have them get you some of the best stuff out there. All right, phenomenal, comfortable. Undertac.com is where you want to go. Use the offer code Steve20. We're in the early days of a new relationship here, but so far I like where it's headed. Undertac.com, code Steve20 is where you want to go to get the great underwear from our brand new underwear partner here on the show. And we just seem like the kind of show that does need a consistent underwear partner. No?
Coattails, baby.
Indeed. All right, coming up on today's show, I have received numerous emails from people since the election whose kids, grandkids have disowned them and are like, Trump's going to put me in a camp. Trump's going to have me assassinated. And a lot of you are asking me, where is this stuff coming from? And I don't know. I have no idea. I don't know.
Bella was telling me she was watching this. Actually, I think it was maybe some connection. I can't remember where it was. This woman was trying to get travel arrangements so she could visit her family because she was worried the Trump administration is going to rescind interstate travel, but just for women.
Yeah. So David Harsanyi is somebody we've had on the show many times over the years. And he's with the Washington Examiner right now, and he's got a brand new book out called BlueAnon. And we booked him like several weeks ago. Obviously, this book's been, scheduled for release for months. And the timing of it is great because I'm getting a lot of these questions from you guys, and I don't know the answers to this stuff. So there clearly is some subculture, shall we call it misinformation? There's clearly some subculture of that out there on the left as well. We will address that with David Harsanyi coming up in the next hour, or the next segment of the program. Next hour of the show. If we have time for Pop Culture Tuesday, I want to discuss the film version of the best Christmas pageant ever because it's really good and I want to give him some props. We'll see how the conversation that is the main part of next hour goes. We may or may not have the time. because there's a couple of figures, one in the Old and one in the New Testament, that I've always found to be very, very fascinating. And there's a lot of mystery around, particularly in the Old Testament. There's this guy Melchizedek, and who is this guy? Was he a priest? Is he a pre-incarnate Christ? What is this Melchizedek? I mean, whole theological, him and the Nephilim are the two great mysteries of the Old Testament, right? And people have for centuries now tried to figure out and glean more about these two figures who are mentioned prominently in the Old Testament, but we're still not given a lot of specifics about them. And and their origins and things beyond just a simple origin, like for the Nephilim. Okay, well then where'd they go, right? Stuff like that. All right. In the New Testament, there is a Jewish rabbi who is mentioned very prominently. He shows up also throughout Jewish Talmudic tradition, as well as throughout Christian tradition. I think he's actually sainted in the Orthodox Church. And I think your tradition, Todd, says that he was actually baptized by St. Peter, I believe. So this, and I want to discuss this guy because I am going to invoke him as the model of how I plan now to proceed into a second Trump term, and how I'm going to analyze it, how I'm going to look at it. All right. So I'm going to lay that out for you coming up in the next hour of the show. All right. And then, of course, we'll find out, Todd and Aaron, what you guys think about that as well. But let's find out what Aaron thinks right now with his rundown of what happened while we were away.
What happened while we were away, brought to you by Wasting No Time. The Trump transition team has started to name a few appointments for various jobs. More rumors have appeared for cabinet positions like Homeland Security and Secretary of State, but so far the only announcements to come from Trump himself are Congresswoman Elise Stefanik for UN Ambassador, Congressman Lee Zeldin for EPA Administrator, and former Acting Immigration and Customs Enforcement Director Tom Homan for Border Czar.
Got another message. Another message to the criminal cartels in Mexico. You smuggled enough fentanyl across this country to kill 148,000 young Americans. You have killed more Americans than every terrorist organization in the world combined. And that's when President Trump gets back in office. He's going to designate you a terrorist organization, and he's going to wipe you off the face of the earth. You're done.
Trump also announced former UN Ambassador Nikki Haley and former Secretary of State Mike Pompeo will not be rejoining his second administration. On the Senate leadership vote, that's expected to go down tomorrow, with three names being bandied about. Senators John Cornyn of Texas, John Thune of South Dakota, and Rick Scott of Florida considered the top competitors. Trump said on Truth Social over the weekend, whomever ends up being the Senate Majority Leader must be ready and willing to work with his administration, including agreeing to recess appointments, prompt cabinet confirmations. And Trump said Republicans should not allow judges to be appointed between now and his inauguration. Senator John Cornyn extended an olive branch to Trump's world on social media over the weekend, saying it's unacceptable for Senate Democrats to blockade Trump's cabinet appointments, and said under his leadership, Senate will stay in session, including the weekends, until Democrats relent. It's officially official now. Trump has won both Nevada and Arizona, bringing his final electoral college tally to 312 votes. Trump, as Steve pointed out, crucially, won suburban women 53-47. Kamala's campaign, according to Politico, ended up $20 million in debt despite raising $1 billion and having $100 million in the bank less than a month ago. So where did all that money go? Well, let this ambiguously European metrosexual explain.
We're at this Kamala Harris Fashion Week party, and look how dystopian this is. Wait for it. Abortion rights are hard. It's this game with the laws or whatever, and you can play it. It's a real thing. There's also, these are the cocktails, Madam President Spicy Rita, Hotties for Harris. There's this game called Grab Them by the Fight for Repro Rights.
That video goes on for another 2 minutes. The Kamala campaign blew through cash on things like a New York City Fashion Week customized party complete with bespoke games and displays. Moving on, hey, I'm old enough to remember when FEMA Director Diane Criswell said disinformation was making it harder for her agency to do their jobs in the aftermath of Hurricanes Helene and Milton.
It's frankly disappointing that we're having to deal with this narrative, and the fact that there's a few leaders that are having a hard time telling the difference between fact and fiction is creating an impedance to our ability to actually get people the help they need.
In completely unrelated news, FEMA has confirmed one of their supervisors engaged in blatant discrimination on the basis of politics. According to a bombshell report at the Daily Wire, a federal disaster relief official ordered workers to bypass the homes of Donald Trump supporters as they surveyed damage caused by Hurricane Milton in Florida. A FEMA supervisor told workers in a message to, quote, avoid homes advertising Trump as they canvassed Lake Placid, Florida, to identify residents who could qualify for federal aid. The supervisor, named Marty Washington, relayed this message both verbally and in a group chat used by the relief team. She has since been fired. In an interview with Roland Martin, Washington says FEMA made her a patsy.
They told me verbally I was fired, but they never provided me anything in writing stating that I was fired. They all alleged that these actions were made on my own recognizances and that it was for my own political advances. However, if you look at the record, there is what we call a community trend. And unfortunately, it just so happened that the political hostility that was encountered by my team, and I was on 2 different teams during this deployment, they just so happened to have the Trump campaign signage. FEMA always preaches avoidance first and then de-escalation. So this is not isolated. This is a colossal event of avoidance, not just in the state of Florida, but you will find avoidance in the Carolinas.
And finally, just about everybody in right-wing America is happy, except for this guy.
Just about done with the killdozer, putting the last final plates of steel on it.
Didn't you see Trump won the election?
Are you kidding me?
No, he won.
We don't need the giant killdozer.
No, not anymore.
All right, I'm starting it. We don't need it. If you want, I guess. We don't need the dozer. You can cancel the trailer to DC. We don't need it anymore.
And that's what happened while we were away.
Aaron's Montage brought to you by our friends over at Hillsdale College. No institution works harder to give young people the best in education than Hillsdale does. Since 1844, that's 180 years ago, Hillsdale has focused on learning, character, and faith and providing just the kind of education needed to preserve liberty, and they extend their mission nationwide through outreach efforts like their free digest of liberty called Imprimis. All right. So too many colleges and universities today indoctrinate their students to hate America, but at Hillsdale, students learn how America can become the freest and most prosperous nation in history. And at a time with so much division on college campuses, Hillsdale students sign an honor code promising to respect the rights of others and the rise to self-government. So take some time to learn more about what makes Hillsdale College unique at daceforhillsdale.com. That's daceforhillsdale.com, F-O-R, daceforhillsdale.com. Couple things in Aaron's Montage I think we should expand on further. Number one, the suburban women. Trump ended up winning white suburban women by 6, 53-47. Continued the trend since we started modern exit polling in 1976. 2 trends we've seen that were held up in this election. Whoever has won Catholics has won every single election with one exception. The first time since 1888, someone won the popular vote and lost the Electoral College. Al Gore won them by like a point and at the most over George W. Bush. That's the only time that stat did not hold up. It held up here, with Trump winning Catholics by 15, a monster number. And then also, since we started doing modern exit polling since 1976, whoever's won the suburbs has won every single time. That held here too. Trump won the suburbs overall, won white suburban women 53-47. Is that a sign of some real hope there as well, given the way we've seen the suburbs trending in the Trump era? Todd, your thoughts?
Based on the same principles I laid out with Catholicism, I would say no, because Kamala and the left are that uniquely bad and that uniquely crazy right now. And we looking at the younger unmarried women, they're going to be the future married suburbanite women, under normal economic circumstances, if they exist, under less pressure with tranny menace, if they're just allowed to be comfortable. How are women going to vote under those circumstances? I just think we shouldn't be myopic about these things. I think that, I have room for hope. I don't have room for we've really, the Holy Spirit is upon us. Let's find out.
Aaron?
I think worst case scenario is that for this election, things maybe just were, and thank you for making the correction, white suburban women. In the montage, I said just suburban women, white suburban women is what we're talking about here. But I think, I'm sorry, the worst case scenario here is that for a moment in politics, things were bad enough that it forced people to say, I don't like this guy, but I'm going to vote for him anyway. That's the worst case scenario here. I think that's overall a good thing.
I agree. Because like we talked about last week, we were beginning to think there was not a point where normie America would snap the rubber band back. And in many respects, we talked about this on the show about a month ago. I started wondering if 2024 was going to end up being the revenge of the normie election that we thought 2022 was going to be. And looking at the demographics, that appears to be the case. For example, the Trump's performance with white suburban women. We're going to reinstate a rule that we had in place the first time that Trump was president. And that is, we're not going to get involved in, if this is true, that would be bad. How many of those did we see the first time that Trump won? And almost none of them ended up actually being true, right?
You look foolish.
All of Russian collusion.
Yeah, you just look like a fool. So we're not going to do that, and we're not going to sit here and analyze and go back and forth over what anonymous sources are either saying from or about or in the media. Either way, from the administration or we're in a. It's very clear what corporate media wants to do to this presidency. And therefore, there is some, shall we call it, counter subterfuge. Go with that as a euphemism, would you say? Some counter subterfuge from the Trump camp that they don't mind aggressively doing to counter the leakocracy known as the media. And that leaves us at times not sure what is true to actually comment on. So, for example, on the cabinet appointments, as Aaron mentioned, unless Trump is talking about it specifically on Truth Social, we don't really have much of an opinion. Also, I'll say this too, that I'm familiar with people, I've got people that are friends of mine that are either being vetted for these positions in his cabinet or worked very closely with Trump in the past. And one thing, it's not quite, let's break the cue stick in half and say we're going to have tryouts, but Trump is really big into the team of rival stuff. And he really likes to see people compete with each other and to see how far they're willing to go. I mean, that's essentially what he did with a longtime buddy of mine, Sam Nunberg. Sam Nunberg is the reason why I got introduced to Donald Trump almost 10 years ago, more than 10 years ago, actually, because he was Trump's primary political point man. And there was another up-and-comer from Lowell, Mass, named Corey Lewandowski that wanted to be where Sam was. So Trump basically just pitted, I won't tell you what happened, specifically not my place to tell you, but Trump basically just pitted Corey Lewandowski and Nunberg against each other. And, Lewandowski was the more ruthless and cunning, maybe dishonest and debased, depending on who you were rooting for in that exchange. One guy's cunning is another guy's debased. One guy's ruthless is another guy's dishonest, right? Depending on which of those jerseys you're wearing, all right? And that's why Lewandowski marched on and Sam did not. I mean, I've gone through this with people I know that have been in Trump's inner orbit. I know people that are being vetted right now for cabinet positions, have been interviewed for cabinet positions, and I can just tell you that I would be. Doesn't mean don't give an opinion if you see Trump do something you don't like Sean Davis doesn't like the Christie over at the Federalist doesn't like the Christie Noem hire. All right. So he is speaking out. Okay. Trump can be very mercurial and likes to float things to see what reactions they get and how people respond. So even something as coveted as a New York Times leak that Marco Rubio is going to be Secretary of State. Now, I will tell you, the political apparatus in Florida is operating as if that's going to go down. But Trump has still not said anything about it on Truth Social yet, which means people that want the other candidates that were mentioned considered, like Rick Grinnell and others, that team of rivals thing, all that, this is very Game of Thrones, and Trump is a king, and all that subterfuge is going on within the king's court right now behind the scenes. You know what I'm saying? So the Truth Social posting is the equivalent of the king's signet ring. All right? Nothing's official, and none of this is meant to be the hyperbole or criticism. I'm given a weather forecast just from people I know on the inside how this operates, okay? So the king's signet ring seals the envelope, all right? And it's handed off to the courier to be delivered to the court, okay? That is what a post on Truth Social is.
By the way, what is Truth Social going forward? I mean, X and Elon Musk have helped save Donald Trump, who is the owner of Truth Social. Is Truth Social like just an appendage of the comms department? What?
Well, what's funny is it's worth more than it ever has been worth before.
Yeah, that's what I'm saying. Where is this thing going?
My guess is that they will become a chief, if they're smart, they will become a chief distributor of original content for the right. They could, because of Trump's fan base and how supportive they are, they could create a Sound of Freedom every year on Truth Social. If the content's good enough, they could. Call me. So, that was a joke. So,
or was it?
Or was it? Indeed. So, now you got me. I'm distracted. Oh, all right. So the signet ring for the king is Truth Social. All right. So Tom Homan, I think everybody is universally excited about that. Like, that's one of those, like when it was even bandied about, I was about to post the GIF of Hawkeye, Don't Give Me Hope, because that's like if we got together and could just like fantasy cabinet, he'd be like the name for the exact job
all
that he's in.
All the cabinets.
Yes. All right. So that's the signet ring. Trump mentioned it on Truth Social. Done. All right. So doesn't mean that the things you're hearing leaked are not going to happen, but it is not official. And rumors in the king's court and counter rumors and people spreading rumors because they're worried it's not going to be them and their faction, or they're worried it's going to be their faction, et cetera.
Yeah.
Just you're.
That's an interesting point. I mean, if you're one of the people that's supposedly against Noam,
yep.
Don't you leak her out there knowing exactly that this is
because she's ticked off some conservatives the last few years.
Yeah.
I mean, our very own Ricky Ratliff, our executive producer here at The Blaze, posted, hey, this is a great way for the Noam. There were a bunch of rumors that Noam was having an affair that were even reported in media. So they weren't even rumors, they were even reported in media that she was having an affair with a prominent Trump operative whose name I might have just mentioned 10 minutes ago. All right. So one way, and so Ricky's like, hey, that kind of stuff can bog down an administration right in the middle of your transition, right? So all this stuff, this is how things operated in governance in human society from pretty much the post-flood, okay, from the time Noah emerged from the ark, all right, until the Declaration of Independence was written. Human governments pretty much behaved, whether they were good or bad, in the very kinds of, ecosystems of intrigue, of palace intrigue that you are witnessing right now. So just understand, nothing's official unless the king's signet ring is applied, and the signet ring is the post on Truth Social. That is when it is official.
So instead of smoke-filled rooms, we have the orange-filled rooms.
Yes. So that brings me to Rick Scott. Okay. And this is where I think we need to have a very grown-up conversation for just a couple of minutes here. We don't have a movement. We don't have the infrastructure and personnel to staff a presidency. Even frankly, the senior, like if we sat down and just decided as a show, we're pretty in tune. We're pretty smart dudes. If we sat down just with what we know and tried to senior staff the big positions, okay, tried to senior staff a Trump administration with just known, proven, and effective conservatives, okay, that we know are ideologically, I don't want to say pure because there's a connotation there. How about ideologically convicted, proven. How about that? All right. And were effective. If we tried to senior staff a Trump administration with people to do that, we could not do it. And that's before you even get to the secondary positions, the advisory positions, the bureaucratic positions. We couldn't even do it with senior staff positions. From basically the time Reagan left office until the emergence of Trump, the only thing we conserved were a lot of book sales and conference tickets and their sales. We didn't really conserve anything else in the whole country, whole culture. That's why people turned to Trump in the first place. So the party now is a coalition-driven party. And the coalition now is who will do Trump's bidding, who will help him to fulfill the mandate he's been given by voters, and who will not. And that's where we get into human nature. For example, look at Attorney General in the first Trump administration. If you'd have told me Jeff Sessions would be one of Trump's worst picks, that was the one we celebrated the most at the time.
Yeah, probably.
Bill Barr is a total Bushy, yet he probably also saved Trump's presidency by ending the Russian collusion hoax. And then he was terrible after that, right?
Yes.
When you get into human nature and why people do the things they do, particularly in the kind of environment I just mentioned of the palace intrigue, I don't know. I don't know. I'm not the Holy Spirit, man. I can't read people's hearts and minds. So then here's why, because I've got plenty of people in Florida whose opinions, including one of Florida's most important conservative activists, just texted me on my way into the office this morning. Rick Scott was terrible on everything we wanted him to be good on when he was governor. Here, I'm going to share with you back exactly what I texted back to this person so you guys can see why I'm backing Rick Scott. Oh, I know he's terrible. But if you're willing to debase yourself for ambition enough to go on Laura Loomer's show, that tells me you will literally do everything Donald Trump tells you to do, and that is way more preferable to the other two options. That's where we are. Now, Rick Scott also had a way better conservative review rating than John Thune or John Cornyn, a way better Turning Point Action rating, okay? But Rick Scott is not the second coming here.
Did
Russell
he really
Kirk.
go on Loomer's show?
He did.
Is that true?
Yeah, that's true. and in a way, Laura Loomer's show, whatever capacity it has, but it may be very important in vetting people moving forward. And I'm not saying this even tongue-in-cheek a little bit. Because the new thing now isn't conservative versus the moderates, establishment versus the grassroots. The coalition fight in the Republican Party now is, whatever their motivations may be, who will help Donald Trump engage the mandate. And by the way, that dude is laying down some very DeSantian issue specifics and visions since the election. I mean, he has put forth a lot of stuff on issues that I'm like, I'm your Huckleberry. I'm in on that. I'm in on that. So he clearly intends to govern. He clearly is laying out a vision. So who then, for whatever their motivations may be, craven ambition, probably Rick Scott's motivation. Ideological allegiance, probably Stephen Miller and his ambitions. I don't know everybody's ambitions. All I want to know is, are they going to help Trump successfully implement the mandate that he was given by the American people and the agenda he is currently laying out to the American people? If the answer is yes, I'm in. If the answer is no, no. If you're going on Laura Loomer's show, that tells me there is almost nothing Donald Trump will ask you to do that you will not debase yourself and do. Hired. My endorsement, Rick Scott, Senate leader. If somebody else who's better ideologically wants to throw their hat in the ring, Ted Cruz could throw his hat in the ring today. Rand Paul could throw his hat in the ring today. Mike Lee could do it, right? But those are the three names we have, right? So one of these things is not like the other. One guy will totally debase himself to do Donald Trump's bidding. The other two won't. So guess who my endorsement is? One's clearly superior to the other. Rick Scott is. Gonna have to look at this. You have to put away your slogans and all the stuff and teddy bears of moral superiority that you comforted yourself with for 30 years and got not a damn thing done despite that. And start looking at this like adulting, okay? Who's gonna help the king be successful? Now, John Thune has already made one major concession, so we're already winning on that front. He's already conceded I will do recess appointments. So again, just a guy wants the job. You get him to do things maybe he doesn't want to do. You see where I'm going with this? That's the reality of the world in which we're in. And we will all have to behave accordingly. So Rick Scott for Senate Republican leader, because he will debase himself for Trump and the other two won't. So you've been struggling with that chronic pain for so long, you're just like, hey, it happens, man. We get older, our joints don't get younger, that stiffness, that soreness, that achiness that just won't go away. It's just, my lot in life. It might be. We do get older. These bodies break down. Nobody lives forever in the current form we're in, right? But it also might be true that you're maybe giving up a little bit too easy. We can't guarantee anything, but one of our best partners on the show is Relief Factor. What is it? It is a supplement created by physicians who can prescribe drugs, but they wanted to go after something that was drug-free that could attack the reason for your chronic pain. That's too much inflammation in your joints, and that supplement is Relief Factor. If you want to try it today, again, no guarantees, but over the years, over 1 million people have. 70% of them saw such great results. In 3 weeks or less, they stuck with the product long term. So it's only $20 to see if you don't see a difference in your pain in 3 weeks or less when you go to relieffactor.com. Again, that's relieffactor.com. Get the 3-week quick start. It's just $20 at relieffactor.com. Also, if you love the merch that you see us model here on the show, on the set, or the stuff we wear, like Aaron's wearing our new logoed sweatshirt here today. If you love that stuff and you want to get to some of the Blaze swag, not just from us, but all the shows here at The Blaze, go to shopblazemedia.com. Use the promo code Steve10. Get 10% off your order. Shopblazemedia.com is where you can go. Use the code Steve10 to get 10% off your order at Steve10 at shopblazemedia.com. So I mentioned at the top of the show, I have gotten numerous emails from people in our audience. My kids have disowned me. My grandkids have disowned me. They think they're getting rounded up. They think they're getting arrested. They think they're being assassinated. Do you know where this stuff is coming from? Because they think this is coming to them because Trump won the election. And I'm like, I have absolutely no idea. I mean, right now, half of the right is trying to stop Trump from hiring a guy with Soros ties to be Treasury Secretary, let alone just rounding people up on trains and having them shot and murdered. Okay. So I wonder if our guest here today might have some answers for us based on his book. His book is out now, The Rise of BlueAnon. Actually, it shows up on the 19th, so you can pre-order it right now. The Rise of BlueAnon, How the Democrats Became a Party of Conspiracy Theorists. David Harsanyi is here from the Washington Examiner. Good to see you again, David. How are you?
I'm well. Thanks for having me. So
let me start there. I mean, I've gotten a slew of these notes from within my audience over the last few days. All right. And my kid's got a gay friend, so he's convinced that kid's getting shot. Okay. My grandchildren are convinced they're being silenced and taken out and taken away. David, where is this stuff coming from that it is fed into the water table that deeply on their end?
I'm happy you asked. The long answer is in my book. There's a long history of how we got here, of how there's a paranoid style of politics within the Democratic Party that has gotten us to this place where millions of people believe that the government's going to round them up and shoot them or put them in camps or whatever. I think specifically what happened was you remember years ago, maybe during the Obama presidency, whatever you said, you were called a racist. At some point, that became a shortcut, an easy way to stop debate. So you don't have to debate someone, you can just go after the man. And what happened was that you have to constantly ratchet up that kind of language all the time until you've gotten to the place where this election, I would say 90% of the case Democrats made was that Donald Trump was Hitler, that he was a fascist, that his followers were semi-fascists. And that was it. I can't think of a single real policy debate that went on from, at least from the Democratic side at all. So I just think that there are entire generations now that have grown up without actually seeing any kind of policy debate between right and left. And they are just, drenched in this hysteria that's constantly going on with the Russia collusion stuff and moving on and on. So, I mean, that's one of the reasons. That's a short answer, I guess.
David, there was one of the moments early in Trump's presidency when I really knew we were in trouble, and And it radicalized me from being a wannabe gatekeeper to, okay, I think we need to take all these gates and throw them into the sea, as in the deepest well in the sea we can find. And it's when Trump tried to do the big tax cut early in his administration, okay? And all of left-wing media corporate media was out there telling people this is going to be the biggest tax increase they've ever seen, okay? And I guess if you lived in some of the eastern states with the SALT deduction, you might have been on the wrong end of that by the time you did your taxes at the end of the year, right? But this wasn't that kind of a nuanced view. I mean, they were just literally telling people what Trump was going for was a baseline massive tax increase. And I remember being in this studio at the time saying, eventually people are going to get their paychecks, Dave, and they're going to look in there and they're going to say, well, last week they took this much out. And this week, they only took this much out. So that doesn't seem like a tax increase to me. And I thought that their claims would clearly be disproven. All right. And yet, a lot of people still, even when that happened, still didn't care, bought into the rhetoric. How much of this now is just because the worldview clash is so balkanized? It's just not even polarized now. It's just a balkanized culture that I want to believe these things, and there's no objective data that you can present to me that will take that away from me, that belief away.
I think that was the case in the past, but I think this election actually broke the fever a little bit, where a lot of people realized after the Biden presidency that the hysterics and the histrionics over every single thing that Donald Trump did, which were quite often just mainstream Republican, policy prescriptions like a tax cut, were nuts. I mean, you remember net neutrality and the incredible, hyperbole surrounding that. It was ridiculous. But just to take it back 1 second, and you mentioned the media and how they sell people things, and that's why in my book, I argue that the left's conspiracy theories and their paranoia is much more dangerous than what you see on the right or the fringe right or anywhere on the right. And mostly it's because they use institutions, they launder this stuff through institutions, through the media, obviously, where they polish it up, calibrate it for plausibility. They bring on experts from places that we're supposed to trust and we did trust in the past, who will tell us it's true. And then they spread it through other institutions, including government institutions. We used to trust people who were in the intelligence community, that they wouldn't, we didn't totally trust them, but we wouldn't believe that they would just make up a story to try to, win an election or whatever. And they did. So that's decimated our belief in expertise, basically, and in many of these institutions, rightly, and also with COVID, for instance. But that's why the Russia collusion thing was much more effective than any conspiracy theory that has ever existed in politics, in my view. It destroyed the Trump presidency. It enveloped our lives for 3.5 years, and then they just moved on like it never happened, and there was no reckoning. So I think, that's part of why it's so much more dangerous and effective in coming from the left.
How do we, David, share a culture? I say on my show a lot that the social compact is broken. All human enterprises, from a marriage to a business partnership, all human enterprises are governed by basically a social compact. And then the covenant of marriage, the contract of a business or an employment, a constitution, those things are now quantifications of a pre-existing social compact. Since we want to be in league together or union together, these are this is, how we will manifest this and quantify this to model that social compact going forward. And I think the social compact is broken. I think they broke it. I think they did it on purpose. And I just don't know, how do you share a culture? How do you do e pluribus unum with people that will do the kinds of things you just talked about and then will show no self-awareness whatsoever and then just move on to the next narrative designed to dissemble and deconstruct? How do we share a culture with that?
It's incredibly difficult, and I'm realizing that now. If I make an argument today about the important, and I believe this, I believe in the Constitution and I believe in the process. So I make an argument, say, that the Senate has to be independent. It cannot listen to the White House, and every Republican's like, Democrats don't care. Why should we care?
Right.
If we just play by their rules, we're going to destroy ourselves. So it's very difficult to make arguments for neutral principles when the other side doesn't care about them and is willing, I forgot which politician I saw today, she admitted that, yeah, she was for getting rid of the filibuster, but only when they're in charge.
Presley. It was Presley who said that. Congresswoman Presley. Yeah.
If we used to share some basic values, at least, and we disagreed on how to get places. But now I think the progressive left the Constitution is in the way. Every week in the New York Times, there's some piece talking about how antiquated the Constitution is and how free speech, is hurting democracy and stuff like that. I don't have an answer for that question. I think we're headed in a pretty bad place unless the Democratic Party comes to grips with, or I don't know, finds their constitutional soul again, or starts to believe in liberal values.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, think back into the 60s. Hippies have always kind of turned me off, but the free speech movement began, it was in Berkeley. These people, even though you disagreed about stuff, there were these pillars and foundational ideas that we could all agree on, and those are gone. So I don't know where we go from there. No, I don't know.
To me, I think there's only two possible solutions for this not to end, have some tragic ending in a history book down the road, and not very far down the road, frankly. One is, I think we need to have some form of spiritual awakening that preceded the founding of the country in the colonial days, that creates some common moral framework that even though, there's Catholics in Maryland and Quakers in Pennsylvania and Baptists in Georgia don't agree on lots of things and have been fighting over them for centuries, there is a common moral code there that binds people together for a social compact. Barring that, I think what we need this administration to do is, and Trump is taking big steps towards that end, I think, with the policy agenda he's laying out, is we need Trump to do, and the Republicans in Washington do what was done in Florida and my home state of Iowa, where the Republican governors there were such effective governors with a clear, contrasted vision of what Democrats were selling, that they provided a proof of concept that greatly marginalized the Democratic Party in their states. It still exists. It's got a letterhead and an address, but by and large, it's just not a relevant force in the day-to-day politics because they have routed them in the arena of ideas with effectiveness, not just talking points. And I think that there's an opening to do that right here, particularly when you see the inroads made with the Hispanic community that I think have potential generational implications if Trump is more serious about governing and prepared to govern than he was the first time around. There's a window here to marginalize the Democratic Party nationally, I think.
No, those are very good points. Two things I'd say. I think effective governance is way underrated. I think people appreciate it. You see it in Florida. For someone who's just voted, let's say for the first time, it's Florida being this red is kind of incredible. And it's incredible how quickly it happened. And I think it had a lot to do with the effective governance of DeSantis, and Republicans there in general. So I think that's, yes, important. You bring them in with that, and then you have to convince them that the underlying ideas are important and they should adopt them as well. It's not just low taxation that's important. I lived in Colorado for many years, and people would come there because it was great governance there, and it was a great state, and they ruined the state because they brought their dumb ideas with them, and no one ever convinced them or explained to them or whatever that why things were good. But I think the most dangerous or the most corrosive notion that the left has today is they cannot simply not abide or live with the idea that somewhere someone else wants to live different than they do. So the idea of federalism to me seems like it is the best answer to how we can all live together in peace, even if we continue to disagree seriously about things. But they can't. They want the national centralized government of DC to go to Oklahoma and make people, let boys play in women's sports. Like they cannot live with the idea that their cultural views should not, that someone rejects them. So until they get over that, I don't know how we can live together in peace. You can't, these institutions, and Trump, I don't know how well he's going to do or not, but you have these agencies that are authoritarian. They run on their own. They don't answer to the people. They don't answer to the Constitution, and they're constantly invading people's lives. So until we pull back DC and let people live the lives they want, I don't I think we're going to be stuck in this kind of environment, I guess.
Sad, but well said. Get the new book, The Rise of BlueAnon. It releases on the 19th. How the Democrats Became a Party of Conspiracy Theorists, from David Harsanyi over at the Washington Examiner. Perfectly timed. I mean, I know from my own experience, these things get planned a year or so in advance, but the timing of this is perfect, David. So good luck with the book, brother. Thank you.
Thanks so much. Thanks for having me.
You bet. That's brought to you by our friends over at Patriot Mobile, where they are already there fully with the parallel economy that we wish was there and more available to us. That's one place, though, where it is, and it's with one product, our mobile phones. We all need nowadays to thrive and succeed in the modern age, so you don't have to give your money directly to companies who hate you anymore. You can give it to our friends at Patriot Mobile instead. Get the same great coverage you get from the corporatists, the globalists. You'll get it from them. They reinvest their profits back into your value system. I've spoken at 3 conferences this year: Fort Worth, Texas, here in Des Moines, my hometown, in Pigeon Forge, Tennessee, and Patriot Mobile was a sponsor at all 3 of them. So that's just anecdotal proof of what I'm telling you, that they do reinvest the profits you give them back into the culture that you care so much about. So make the switch today. Get a free month of service when you make that switch to get you started at patriotmobile.com/Steve. Use the offer code Steve for the free month of service at patriotmobile.com/Steve. Make the switch like our family did. You won't regret it. We have not. patriotmobile.com/Steve, offer code Steve. Guys, I thought the most poignant thing I thought that David said there is when he said, I think that the conspiracy radicalization on the left is way more dangerous than what we see on the right, because they are willing to weaponize institutions to spread and impose their mythologies, right?
Yes.
It's not just corners of their ecosystem, but it is a weaponized aspect of their ecosystem. And I go back to August 8th, 2021. Biden's head of the CDC goes on CNN and admits the COVID vaccines no longer stop the transmission of the COVID virus, including people who have been vaccinated can now get and spread the virus. She said this on August 8th of 2021 on CNN. Almost 1 month to the day, September 7th of 2021, is when Biden issued an executive order that you could not work for a corporation with, what was it, more than 100 employees, I think, something like that. You couldn't work for a corporation with more than 100 employees if you didn't take a vaccine that a CDC director had just admitted a month prior did not work. And how many? And there are multiple examples of that, legion, in fact.
Well, and in Aaron's montage, when they just flat out, if you had a Trump sign, you're not human. We must pay these people the honor of viewing them as human by making them pay for this, by making them suffer, because that's how we turn them around and get them back. It's not by just saying, hey, differences. No, you must pay. You must look at that hard in the mirror, and then you must repent. We'll be honoring them as humans by making them do that.
Who was Gamaliel, and why is he going to be my spirit guide going into a Trump term 2.0? Going to explain that to you here next. All right, we're back here with Hour 2, live and on demand on Blaze TV, radio, and podcast. I am Steve Deace. He's Todd Erzin. He's Aaron McIntyre. And you can let us know what you think about what we think via the stevedeace.com inbox. Just email us, steve@stevedeace.com. That's DEACE. Like us on Facebook, me, we, and Gab. You can follow me at Steve Deace Show on Twitter. I almost said Tex because I couldn't figure out as a Twitter X. It's Twitter X. Yeah. They're the same, just different name now. Instagram, TikTok. You can also, if you wouldn't mind, look us up on the podcast and leave us a 5-star review if you like the podcast. Hit subscribe or follow if you're on iTunes, and that'll make sure every time we do a brand new episode, it shows up inside your podcast feed every single time. And this portion of the show brought to you by our friends over at MD Hearing. This holiday season, get the hearing that you or a loved one deserves with MD Hearing. You go to shopmdhearing.com. Use promo code Steve to get a pair of hearing aids for just $297, and they are adding a free extra charging case. That's a $100 value just for our followers and listeners and viewers here at the Steve Deace Show. That's shopmdhearing.com. Use our promo code Steve. Get a pair of hearing aids for just $297 at shopmdhearing.com using the promo code Steve. Who is MD Hearing? It's a FDA-registered rechargeable hearing aid that costs a fraction of what typical hearing aids cost. In fact, their new Neo model is over 90% less expensive than clinical hearing aids. Fits right there inside your ear. No one's even going to know that it's there. All right. Plus, they just launched the Neo EXS, which is their smallest hearing aid ever. All right, so shopmdhearing.com. Use the promo code Steve to get a pair of hearing aids for just $297 at shopmdhearing.com, promo code Steve. All right, we are going to see if we have time here at the end of the hour to do Pop Culture Tuesday. If we do, I want to give some promotion to the best Christmas pageant ever, the film adaptation. It's very well done. Saw it last week. And if we don't get to it, let me just say right now, would highly recommend this is a family viewing experience. They did a phenomenal job. The young lady who plays Imogene Herdman in particular is very good. So if you know the play, it's a favorite in our house. It's the first thing that our oldest daughter, Anastasia, ever auditioned for here locally. They do it justice. It's well done. Highly would recommend it. The best Christmas pageant ever. We'll have more to say if we have time later in the show. But I want to talk... Gamaliel is a figure in the New Testament that I've always found very fascinating because he gets a couple of high-profile mentions. And then that's it, right? And the history of Gamaliel is actually pretty extensive. He is littered throughout both Jewish and Christian tradition. Both in Talmudic tradition on the Jewish side, and then also on within Christian tradition as well. So who was he, and why am I going to use him as my inspiration heading into a second Trump term? Well, let's set the scene here. Remember, as we've told you before, initially Christianity is an exclusively Jewish argument. It is Jews arguing with Jews about whether this mysterious carpenter from Nazareth named Yeshua is the long-awaited Messiah or not. You have several different groups and sects that had developed at the time leading up to Christ. And you had a group called the Sanhedrin that essentially governed daily Jewish affairs in Judea under Roman governance. And they were comprised of basically, two theological factions, but they operated as more than that. I mean, they were very involved in the governing of the people. So in some respects, they were also religious denominations, but also manifested political parties, and they were called the Sadducees and the Pharisees. The Sadducees would basically be, for first century Judaism, the Democrats. They had given up on the idea of there being a resurrection and therefore a judgment. They basically had abandoned any of the supernatural aspects of the faith. They were largely involved in social affairs, political affairs, I guess you could say a proto-version, first century version of social justice. The high priest at the time of Christ's trial is a Sadducee by the name of Caiaphas. He's the one who says better for one man to die than for the whole nation to perish, meaning it was fine to kill this guy, so that the current paradigm where Rome largely leaves us alone, provided we, obey the edict against owning swords and we don't rebel against them, etc. Okay, they pretty much let us continue our traditions and live as free as you can be under an oppressive regime like Rome. So they were interested in the political status quo and calculus and acquisition of political power and influence primarily. The reason why in the Gospels you see Christ arguing with Pharisees way more than Sadducees is because the Pharisees are frankly the good guys. I know we've kind of turned them into a pejorative in modern Christianity, so that now anyone who actually wants to keep the word of God is considered pharisaical in modern megachurch culture, when it's really the megachurches who are very pharisaical. We're not going to actually teach the substance of God's word, and we're going to reduce it to a couple of things that fit into our own narrative. But I digress. The Pharisees traced their lineage, according to a lot of their traditions, back to a very pivotal figure named Ezra. And Ezra is who comes back and rededicates the temple after the Jews had been dispersed. He rededicates now the city of Jerusalem, the walls rebuilt by Nehemiah, the temple rebuilt by Zerubbabel and others. He comes back to rededicate it. They are the good guys. They're the keepers of the flame. You would say they were kind of your Republicans of the era. They still believed in judgment, resurrection, still believed a Messiah would come. They had not abandoned and been ashamed of the supernatural parts of their history and tradition. But they wanted, like today's Republicans, though, things had to fit in their paradigm. And they were convinced that they were the only paradigm that would be able to acknowledge what God was working through and what he was not. And one of their claims was nothing good comes from Nazareth. They were convinced their read of the scriptures, their understanding of it, was the paradigm by which God would act and whom he would act through. So they are very disturbed that someone shows up saying a lot of the things they believe and performing a lot of the miracles that they still believed in, but isn't joining them. Like he's not there to say, I'm here to fulfill their vision, but he represents a completely different vision. Any of this kind of sound culturally familiar at all?
Yeah.
Quite a bit, actually, right? It's almost as if there's nothing new under the sun. Just new people under the sun that haven't heard it yet, right?
Somebody said that too once.
Yeah, indeed. So there's a great debate that takes place whether or not Yeshua of Nazareth is the Messiah. Many Jews believe he is, many more believe he's not. And it's within this debate that this figure named Gamaliel is prominently mentioned. He actually is one of those who is said by Paul himself to have been one of his mentors when he was a Pharisee. That he learned at his feet, I believe, is the exact phrase Paul uses in the book of Acts. Or is used about Paul in the book of Acts. Luke actually wrote the book of Acts. So he is taught by this great renowned leader, Saul of Tarsus is. He goes on to become someone who believes he's doing the right thing by purging this heretical sect from Judaism known as Christians. In fact, he's on his way to a place called Antioch when he is converted. Antioch is the place where people are first referred to as Christians, and it was not meant as a compliment. So he's going to purge, cleanse, purify Judaism of this sect. He's on a mission from God, he thinks. Then on the road to Damascus, God famously shows up and says, "You're doing it wrong." And he is converted and becomes the Apostle Paul. But we will hear the name Gamaliel will show up one more time in the New Testament. And it is when the disciples are being persecuted by the Sanhedrin for continuing to preach the gospel of this Messiah they claimed was resurrected and ascended into heaven. And this continues to cause great disagreement, particularly among the Pharisees. Two figures that are mentioned in the New Testament that are very favorable to Jesus and his message: Joseph of Arimathea, Nicodemus. Joseph of Arimathea is who donated his burial tomb at great expense for Christ to be buried in. Nicodemus is the one who comes in the dark of night to meet with Christ, and we get John 3:16 from that conversation. And 3:17, that was the closing scripture verse of our show for several years. For God so loved the world that he gave it his only begotten Son, that whomsoever will believe in him will not perish but have eternal life. For God did not send his Son into the world to condemn the world, but so that through him the world may be saved. They were Pharisees. So there was division even within the Pharisees, who were already within division with the Sadducees. And through these ongoing arguments that are continuing now, because now Christ's disciples are preaching and teaching his word. Now they are performing miracles in his name, even at the temple. They're seeing mass conversions here post-Pentecost. And so it's in the midst of this, in this ongoing attempt to persecute what they viewed as this heretical sect out of existence, this heretical sect of Judaism out of existence, that maybe the most respected Jewish teacher of the day, Gamaliel, gets up and says essentially the following: we should stop persecuting these people. Let's just wait and see if what they are preaching and teaching is true. God will reveal it. Not to mention, we keep persecuting them and we're not doing it. It's not stopping it at all. It's not working. So either this is not of God, and if it's not, we can't stop it anyway. It'll burn itself out. But if it is of God, we won't be able to stop it anyway. Let's just let this play out. I know that was a fisherman last week, and I know that's that John guy who keeps referring to himself as the disciple Jesus loved, which is kind of weird. Okay, it was like 17 years old. Okay, I get that. I know it looks kind of weird. You know what else looks weird? Like Moses holding his arm up to win a war, okay, all day long, and marching around Jericho 5 times and with shouts. Seemed kind of weird. Our ancestors did it, okay? So I know it looks weird. I'm not entirely convinced this is real. Probably isn't. But it's really no threat to us in any way. And we keep treating it like a threat, and it keeps growing despite our treatment. So it could be that we're incentivizing people to go to it out of rebellion to us. So let's just take a step back, stop letting it cause so much division among us, and let's let this thing play out. See whether or not this is of providence or not. This is from God or not. Because if it is from God, we won't be able to stop it anyway. Now, tradition will later say that Gamaliel will actually go on to become a convert. I think he is sainted in the Orthodox Church. I believe your tradition teaches he was baptized by Peter.
I'm entirely not sure, so good Catholic pro tip if you nail that one.
I think that's true. We could research that, but I think that's true. Okay. And of course, one of his prized pupils, the Apostle Paul, goes on to write most of the New Testament. And post-ascension is the most influential theologian the Christian church has ever produced and probably will ever produce. Now, what does that have to do with how I'm going to treat the second term of Donald Trump? Everything. Absolutely everything. Todd, you've mentioned before that you thought a real pivot point for me from a career standpoint is when Trump got elected, and I came in here the next day, and after fighting him with the Cruz campaign, I fought him with Free the Delegates all the way through, and I just said, I lost. The people have spoken. Never Trump is over as far as I'm concerned, and now it's time, and hope that this is successful because that's what would be best for the country, right?
Oh, yeah, and I was absolutely right about that, but more right than I even thought, because then we followed year after year after year of Trump derangement syndrome. So not only was it good business decision, but from a sanity point of view, yeah, it obviously was existential in nature.
And at that time, we weren't making that much money doing this show, so the business decision factor wasn't even a calculus. Now we have to think about it because we are, okay? But in 2016, 2017, we didn't have a shred of the level of audience we have now. Okay, so at that point in time, it was really more about my own peace of mind and credibility. Because I saw what happened with people like Bill Kristol and all these guys that now tax cuts are bad because Trump was going to do them. So now we're opposed to the things we said we were for decades, and we're opposed to them now because Trump's going to do them. So that makes me wonder, were you ever for those things? You see what I'm saying? Yeah. And that's just not me and how I roll. Okay. I have been either throughout the course of the last decade of the Trump era, as one of the first people he ever reached out to when he was running for president, as one of the people that with a large platform that opposed him the most vehemently at the same time, in the same cycle. I've been on opposite ends of him in 2 primaries. I begged every contact I had in the Trump White House when we found this guy named Scott Atlas. Hire this guy, bring him in for months before they finally did. Okay? I mean, I've held every position on Trump you can hold on the right without abandoning your soul and or losing your mind. I've held every one of these positions over the course of the last 9 years, and that's not even a slight exaggeration. It's just not. And over that course of time, I've either been behind or ahead of what was actually happening, and thus misread the room more times than not. Trump has been given a clear mandate here by the American people, a clear mandate. He is laying out an issue agenda that is very DeSantian. It's a broad vision in his own way. It's his own voice. But he is demonstrating here, he is serious about governing. He is laying down a vision. I mean, Trump 2017 didn't know what a recess appointment was. Now he is out just days after winning the election telling the Senate Majority Leader candidates, you will give me my recess appointments or I'm going to make all of you wish your daddy had worn a condom that night. That's essentially what he's doing. Okay? I need to be self-aware here. I've been wrong a lot. In my defense, I acted on the evidence that I thought that I had at the time. And the one time in the Trump era I've been really right was the one time he should have listened to people like me, because then he probably wouldn't have lost, well, quote unquote, lost in 2020 if he did. But other than that one moment, I've largely been wrong throughout much of this era. I've largely misread the room. And you know why? Because I entered into this with preconceived notions of what this is supposed to look like, what it's supposed to sound like, how the paradigm operates. You know, like the Pharisees. I viewed myself as the keeper of the flame here.
And the status quo is the status quo
until
it isn't anymore.
Correct. And all of a sudden, the guy becomes president and does a lot of things that I never thought he'd do, and he did them. Now he is laying out, I'm just going to tell you right now, if Trump had been given out these kinds of issue visions in the winter of 2023, spring of 2023, I'd probably never get involved in that primary and just let it play itself out, keep my mouth shut, and we'll see. Best man wins. But he's doing it now. So I am going to take my cue from Gamaliel. It doesn't necessarily look the way I thought like a great right-wing renaissance was going to look when I got into this business. It doesn't. All the books I read from all the same authors you did too, and all the shows I listened to from all the same shows you listened to too, it wasn't, this isn't the way it was going to look. Okay? It wasn't the way I was going to look. So it's very clear here, I keep beating my head against this wall and keep just getting beaten. I can't stop it anyway. I can't stop it anyway. I'm not empowered to stop it anyway. There are forces at work here beyond me. I can't anyway. I just got my ass kicked in my own home state. I mean, I helped win a state legislative primary here in the same cycle that Donald Trump beat me by 30 points, okay? There's something unique in this where he is concerned. Something unique is happening there. So it is time now for me to take a cue from Gamaliel. The time, and frankly, it's probably overdue. I'm being honest about that too. But I can't do anything about the past, and I acted on what I thought was the best information at the time. What I'm not going to do now is make the same mistakes I've made in the past. I'm not even going to call balls and strikes the way we did before, because I don't know. We tried to do that the first time around. I would have said, Jeff Sessions, great hire. He was awful. He was awful, because I only sized him up from an ideological perspective. He was a terrible attorney general. Awful. At this point, short of child molesters and known criminals, whoever Donald Trump wants to appoint to these positions, I have no argument. You ask me my preference, I could probably give you one, but again, I don't know if they're going to really activate his agenda. I don't know how they fit into the way he wants to run his own habitat, his own administration. I don't know the answer. And it's very clear after the last decade, there's lots of answers I don't know. So you know what? I'm just going to sit back here, watch this play out. Because if we're watching, and if he truly has some level of anointing, and I have come to the conclusion he has some, doesn't mean he's anointed. That's a different distinction. He has some level of anointing. I don't believe you dodge being outspent 5-1, 94 felony indictments and convictions. I just don't believe you do that and win naturally. I think that requires some level of supernatural for that to happen. So I'm going to just sit back here and we're going to see. We're going to look at the fruit. And the fruit's not going to be personnel and people. Human nature is very complicated. Like a bunch of you are asking me why Ted Cruz is endorsing John Thune. I have no idea. Could just be, and I don't know. I've talked to Ted several times since he won. Not about this. It could just be as simple as John Cornyn is terrible and John Thune is the only person he thinks can beat him, so he wants to stop John Cornyn. I don't know. Maybe he knows something about John Thune. I don't know. Maybe he's got a deal with John Thune I'm not aware of. You see what human relationships and human behavior is complicated. Maybe Donald Trump can uniquely get a guy with Soros ties to do things for him that somebody else would not. They've made some kind of deal. Going to give his kid some appointment. Grandson gets to be an Eagle Scout. I don't know. I don't know. Like, I don't know how this fisherman is out here now preaching the gospel and doing these miracles. Makes no sense to me. He didn't go to any Hebrew school I taught. I don't know. That's what Gamaliel says. I have no idea how this Peter guy's doing this stuff. Not to mention, he was just some snot-nosed kid named Simon when he was growing up in my hood. I don't know. I have no clue how he's doing it. I don't know. Why don't we just sit back? Instead of acting as if we're empowered to stop this when clearly we're not, and we're just making ourselves look bad by claiming otherwise, why don't we just let this thing run its course and we'll just find out in the wash. We'll just see for ourselves whether this is of God or not. And that's exactly where I am, and I'm at total peace. I'm good. I mean, one of my best buddies, Ryan Walters, is one of the finalists to be Secretary of Education. Trump called me and said, who should he hire? I'd say Ryan Walters. But I don't know the other candidates. They might be a better fit. He might know something I don't know. They might get along better with somebody else. I don't know. So if Trump picks somebody else, okay, cool. Let's watch and see how it plays out. I don't know. Like we said at the top of the show, there's not exactly a rotisserie roster of proven and effective conservative people to just appoint to all these senior cabinet positions anyway. So let's find out. I want it to work. I want it to be successful. The country desperately needs this to work. Especially with him casting the issue vision that he is casting. I'm a policy guy. I'm about the name on the front of the jersey, America. I don't care about the name on the back. I don't care. Listen, if Trump is successful, the odds Ron DeSantis will ever be president are really low. Let's just be honest about that. because J.D. Vance becomes basically unstoppable for the GOP nomination. And now you're looking at like another 8 years in the future, and people have short-term memories where that stuff comes about. So, I mean, I could sit here and make snide remarks and those kinds of things because, well, that's somebody I'm close to and connected with. That's all BS. Other people will do stuff like that. That's never going to be me. I don't care. I don't. If I was like that, I wouldn't have stayed in Iowa all these years. I've stayed here in Iowa because I'm not like that, and I don't want to get involved in that world. I want to say what I believe and support who I believe in and have no other motivations other than that. There's just nothing good comes for the country for this to be a failure. For Trump to get this level of mandate and fail would be awful for our side, awful. And therefore for the country. I want it to be successful. I can't stop it from being successful even if I didn't want it to be anyway. So like Gamaliel, I'm just going to sit back here and observe and hope for the best. Because if this is a righteous movement, we won't be able to stop it anyway. And I'm not going to sit here and say, well, this guy posted a blog in 2014, and this guy voted this way on some procedural quorum call in 2019, and this guy, gave a statement on this in last year. I'm not going to do all that. If other people want to do that, cool. Maybe it's even necessary. That's not going to be me. I am in Gamaliel mode. Tried to stop it, can't. So that either means I'm incentivizing it or I can't stop it because this has divine favor. And it's what's needed right now. So stop making a clown out of yourself and doing stuff you'll regret later on and let it play out. Let's find out. For example, I can tell you, from my buddy Ryan Walters, Trump is very serious about eliminating the Department of Education. Very serious about it. Not the guy I would have picked, thinking would finally be the Republican to fulfill that, right? But if he wants to do it, long live the king. Amen?
Amen.
Amen.
And Trump didn't think Trump was the guy to do that because he didn't do it in the first 4. I mean, things have changed.
Mm-hmm. They have. And so now I'm going to sit back and watch the changes play out. And doesn't mean I'm going to be supportive of everything, but it also means I'm going to be hesitant to be critical of things I don't immediately support because I'm going to operate with some humility. Maybe there's something here I don't know and don't understand. Because over the last 9 years, there have clearly been several things I didn't know and didn't understand. And sometimes you're too smart for your own good and you know too much data for your own good and too many facts for your own good and too much philosophy and precedent and tradition for your own good. See, it is not wanting to hold Trump accountable or his movement accountable to a righteous standard that makes you a Pharisee. It's looking at him and his movement and saying nothing good comes from Nazareth. That's what does. That's what does. Folks, today's economic environment is still really stressful for a lot of us, but with the Fed finally dropping interest rates, there's no better time than right now to put you and your family in a better financial position. If you're a homeowner, American Financing is helping thousands of families just like you who have been putting everyday expenses on credit cards get out from underneath that debt by tapping into their home's equity. American Financing is saving their borrowers over $800 a month on average. That's like $10,000. That's like a $10,000 raise at work, and it costs absolutely nothing to find out how much you can save. And they're closing some in as little as just 10 days. If you start today, you may not even have to make next month's mortgage payment just in time for the holidays. So there's no better time than now to turn your situation around. Call today, 888-675-4090. That's 888-675-4090 for American Financing. 888-675-4090. AmericanFinancing.net/Deace is also where you can go online.
NMLS 182334, NMLSConsumerAccess.org.
All right, I want to get you guys' reaction to what I just laid out. There's a lot more to it But in general, I kind of gave you what's kind of going to be my lodestar here for the foreseeable future, watching this all play out. Because I would have told you at this time a year ago, there is no way Donald Trump, I would have just told you earlier this year, there is no way I believe Donald Trump can navigate all these legal pitfalls and get elected. He did. So I would have never guessed that he would use long form podcasts to completely, I wouldn't say reinvent himself at all, but give people maybe a fuller depiction of himself. The idea that we would have won white suburban women by 6 points, I would have told you even a month ago, I don't think that's happening. Okay? So there are things happening here beyond me that I do not understand, Todd. And I think it is time now for me, like Gamaliel, to sit back and observe.
Well, there's a reason you can be in that position at peace, as you said, but it has to do, I have to point out one area of disagreement to make that point with you, and it was kind of a throwaway line, but where you said maybe you should have gotten to this point sooner. That's the part I totally disagree with, because to get to this point of peace, you had to play out what was undeniably the supporting the arrival of the person who not only philosophically but in terms of accomplishment undeniably was the embodiment of your entire career, and that is Ron DeSantis. It would have been an utter betrayal not to have support him. But because he failed in the way that he did, things played out as the way that they did, it allows you to be where you are now. You did not pull any punches. You never sold out. And it still got to this point nonetheless. That's why you can be at peace. You left it all on the field, because here's the simple fact. I begrudge Donald Trump nothing. To the victor go the spoils. What he accomplished, man, especially after getting shot at, and that apparently made him a better man, I just tip my hat to that. I honor that. Me allowing to go forward with Donald Trump the way I have is like, dude, I'm going to trust you the way Steve is trusting him, because listen, I'm just, if you cave in the ways that you caved in the past to the experts, to the bureaucracy, etc., after getting shot at once and a second attempt that failed, and if you keep being the same person, man, that's a you problem. So I'll just let's see. You've absolutely earned that right. But, Steve, you couldn't have felt that way even with the bullets flying. I'm knowing you as well as I do. Donald Trump is doing the things he's doing because he himself, and I am confident of that, absolutely confident of this, he was a little jealous of Ron DeSantis. All that success, not just words coming through. The reason you said it, what he's doing right now in all these videos is DeSantian. That's not a coincidence, because they are. And yes, Donald Trump is just the kind of guy that part of all the success on behalf of the country, and he loves it. I'm also going to make you forget that Ron DeSantis ever existed. Well, you won. You have the right to do that now. And none of that is Ron's fault. God bless you, Ron, for everything you did. But to get where you are with this, Steve, you've got behind that horse, and a horse like Ted Cruz, in terms of the conservative example after years of Mitt Romney's and John McCain's, and it's still Donald Trump rose above. That's why you can have peace, because you didn't give on that when the real thing was there, and it was real, and it was worth honoring. But it has turned out to be different, as so many things with God turn out to be. So here we are. And that's why this Gamaliel thing is important. And I wanted to stress everything I just said, because to put my own spin on what Gamaliel means. It's very, very easy, without the context that Steve laid out, to read Gamaliel as he's just the chill, hippie Jesus kind of guy. Dudes, what are we all arguing about? Man, let's just wait and see how that... No, that's not who he was at all. A Pharisee modeled Paul to be the one. A Pharisee who witnessed crucifixion after scourging, after crucifixion, and all this as part of it. Holding cloaks, clapping too. Think Jack in Lost. Jack, all proud. Oh, these can't be wrong. Telling Locke, why do you believe it? And whatever season it is, when Jack's finally like, we have to go back. That's Gamaliel. Gamaliel is just like, dudes, we did what we thought was right at the time. And I don't know where this train is going. And I might not like it all the time. All I know is there's something going on here. This is why I said what I said about Ron DeSantis. It's really, there's no, and I don't think Steve was, but I was like, there's no repenting of that on my part. He is, pound for pound, one of the finest public servants, statesmen in the history of this country. Results, character, all of that stuff. And Trump cult, stop it with your nonsense, just like whatever we're calling the other
DeSantis dead enders. I kind of like that one.
Both of them.
I kind of like that one.
You're still, because you're
by the way, amen to everything you just said about Ron DeSantis as a public servant. No. But go ahead, finish.
No. When you said there was nothing new, does that sound familiar? Yeah, it sounds familiar because a lot of people you want to stay stuck. You don't want to follow things down to the end and just see, here's the story. This is how it ended. And God clearly is moving on in a different way. As a man of God, you need to accept that. My goodness. I don't care what side you're coming from. Catholic, Protestant. If you've picked up your Bible and done any reading at all, Mark Hamill is a really stupid guy, but that line, it's not going to go the way you think it's going to go. Everybody wake up. Everybody wake up and give actual hope a chance.
Whoa.
Yeah.
What just happened?
I'm not for false hope, and a lot of you believe in a lot of false hope. Real hope. Real hope. God doing things beyond your understanding.
So I had no idea over the weekend that you were going to come up with the post that you sent us, I think, on Sunday, Steve, where you said it was time for some grown-up talk. And it was basically a melding of the first segment and this segment.
Mm-hmm.
I had no idea because I'd been pondering the exact same thing over the weekend, over the long weekend as well, kind of in my free time, just pondering kind of last better part of the decade. And again, I didn't know you were kind of doing the same thing. We don't coordinate, okay, we're going to make this move here, then this move here. But I, too, had an overwhelming sense of peace. I think subconsciously, since the GOP primary that wasn't, I'd been kind of going through my own Gamaliel phase. And you can see this on X. I haven't really posted a bunch this year. I really haven't. Other than, clapping back here and there at people either calling us sellouts or disloyal, what have you. Other than a few of those types of posts. Because it was apparent to me after the GOP primary that wasn't. I don't get something here, or this entire process is not serious. And I probably would have come down on the side of this entire thing is not serious. I don't think Donald Trump is serious. I don't think the voters are serious. It's not serious. And that's kind of where I came down on. I wasn't going to vote for him back then because, I wasn't going to hurt him either. I wasn't going to try to go out of my way to hurt him, but I wasn't going to go out of my way to help him. And then that changed after he took a bullet. And it became apparent to me, well, the other side thinks that this is very serious.
Mm-hmm.
They think that this is very serious indeed. So, like it or not, I got to say no to that. I got to at least say no to that. And now that we're on the other side of this, as you pointed out, everything that he has overcome. I said late last week, Ron DeSantis is an example of what you can accomplish. Donald Trump is an example of what you can overcome. I mean, my goodness. I don't want to rehash all of that because you laid it out very nicely. But it's coming to the conclusion that you have to accept, we've said this many times before, you have to accept reality for what it is, not what you would like it to be. And the reality is this, you can make whatever moral proclamations you want. You can have whatever opinion you want. You can make whatever statements you want about gravity. Is that relevant to gravity? No, gravity just is. I'm saying this, and I'm like the woman on the plane. You can believe me or you cannot believe me, but that MFer back there is not real. I'm telling you that this is real. This is reality. We don't have a meritocracy on the right anymore. We don't have a democracy on the right anymore. We have a monarchy. And this is a descriptive statement, not a prescriptive statement. That is just the reality. That the number one qualification for anyone, really down to supporters, is, are you loyal? That's just the reality. And let's just pretend, as a thought experiment for just a little bit, let's just pretend Donald Trump has zero ego whatsoever. Can you blame him for making that his chief rubric? Loyalty? I can't.
After you've almost been bankrupted,
Correct.
assassinated, and incarcerated? Right. Probably not.
Let's pretend he has no ego. Can you fault him for making that your chief rubric for whether or not you want to elevate somebody into a position of power? I can't. I just can't. And I don't know how honestly an honest person could not do that. So it's loyalty and then maybe competency, capability after that. That is the world in which we live in. That's just the reality. You can make whatever proclamations, moral or otherwise, no king but Jesus. Yeah, that's true for us spiritually, but I'm just telling you this is the way it works on the right now. It's gravity. That is just the truth. And he's going to do some things that we love. He's going to appoint some people that we love.
Like Mike Huckabee just got appointed to ambassador to Israel 5 minutes ago.
Wow.
By Trump.
He's going to say some things that make us uncomfortable, what have you. When he does the things we love, long live the king. When he doesn't do the things that we love, he's still the king. If you cannot come to that understanding and accept that reality for what it is, and this is the piece that I had, is that I think I understand this dynamic now. I think I understand this. It's why, and I will just say this as well, I think this was probably the truth before the GOP primary that wasn't. I'm just going to be honest with you. As much as it irked me before that to see some major figures with blue check marks on X saying, "Oh, Ron DeSantis is just killing his career with this," regardless of your motivation for saying that, they ended up not necessarily in the killing his career thing, but in terms of not really having a path to the presidency, they were probably true about that. It's also why going forward, this show is going to get attacked from multiple factions for being disloyal to Donald Trump and from being accused of selling out.
So, like every other day.
Like every other day. Yeah.
Yes.
That's why that's going to be the dynamic.
The names of the attackers change,
yes.
but the attacks are
that's
basically
going to be the
same.
dynamic going through. And it's also, I'll just say this as well, when the time comes to talk about 2028, it's probably a fool's errand, unless things really blow up with this administration, to throw a support behind anybody not having a last name that rhymes with dance. That's just the reality. That's just me.
He's the crown prince.
That's just me talking here. I'm not talking for you or Todd, but that's just the reality. And you can not like it. You can like it. You can believe me. You cannot believe me. But I really firmly believe that that's where we live now. Again, descriptive, not prescriptive. There are going to be some great moments. There are going to be some moments that make us roll our eyes. But that's just where we are now.
Very well said. Let me make sure I also mention our partners over at Preborn before we get out of here today, because they are an outstanding pro-life ministry we've been proud to partner with here at The Blaze. Your generosity, along with their effectiveness, we estimate has saved tens of thousands of babies. Preborn, over the course of its ministry, has saved hundreds of thousands of babies. And they do it by confronting mom with the truth of the ultrasound so that she hears that baby's heartbeat to know it's not a blob or a tissue mass, it's a baby. And then when mom chooses life, they provide her the grace. They give her the support she needs, sometimes for up to 2 years after the baby is born. Prenatal, postnatal care, all this stuff, by the way, it's all free of charge, even though none of it is free. So if you want to make a tax-deductible donation today to keep making this ministry success possible, we would greatly appreciate that. Go to preborn.com/Steve. For as little as $28, you can fund an ultrasound that would say that it's got at least 50-50 odds of saving a life today. Where else can you put in $28 with those kinds of odds of saving a precious lamb? All right, go to preborn.com/Steve. That's preborn.com/Steve, or dial #250, say the keyword baby on your mobile phone, or just go to preborn.com/Steve. By the way, The reason why the Trump empire was so threatened by DeSantis is because he is also a king. That's why they were threatened by DeSantis and not Nikki Haley and Vivek Ramaswamy and all these other people. Because he operates in Florida as a king. There is no conservative movement. Nothing good happens in Florida unless Ron DeSantis makes it happen directly. Nothing good. Nothing. It's because he was a true rival for the throne. That's why they were so threatened by him. They saw the fiefdom that he built in Florida. The will that he exerted to bend the legislature, to bend Fauciism, all of it to his will. They saw all of that. And they recognized it. Hey, that's what we do. That's why they were threatened. So take it as a compliment. Ron DeSantis is also a king. We are in a post-Christian era now, which means the only two options on the table whenever you're in an era where Christianity is not prevalent in terms of influence in the culture, your only two options are Caesar or the total state. Those are your only two options. You don't have any other options. Something's going to rule. Something will always rule. Something must always be worshipped. So the total state is never our friend. Caesar can be. Depends on if you get Nero or Constantine. Amen? Okay?
Amen.
The total state's never your friend if you're a believer. Caesar can be, depending on if it's a red one or a blue one or not. And Ron DeSantis and Donald Trump are both every bit red Caesars. Romans 8:28.